And then I get into a clinic at the University of Utah, and they do what's called a skin punch biopsy, which is at this time a very new test. I think it was the first one actually ever done in whatever this clinic was. And what they're measuring is the nerve fiber density in your skin. So your sensory nerves. And these nerves are not tested for in an EMG and an NCS because it's not sensitive enough for those tiny capillary nerves. Anyway, that finally comes back. It's a positive test. I'm like, thank God I have a diagnosis. It's small fiber neuropathy. It's idiopathic, so they don't know what it is, why it's there. But okay,
Right.
I'm not crazy. There's something physical going on. And basically then they give me this whole spiel about like, well, they don't know what to do about it. Basically, we give you gabapentin, and then if that doesn't work, we go through this gamut of medication, circle jerking until we find something that takes any amount of edge off.
Welcome to the Healing with the Diamonds podcast. We are Larry and Kaylin Diamond, here to share the insights and practical wisdom of our journeys using ancestral wisdom to heal as a family. This podcast is for educational purposes only. Before making any lifestyle changes, consult your medical team. This is not medical advice. With that being said, let's start this episode. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I am Larry Diamond. I am the lesser and certainly less attractive half of Healing with the Diamonds. My wife, Kaylin Diamond, isn't here right now. I think one of our dogs wants to take her place. We'll see. We are lucky enough to have Ryan, Mitchel Brown, and I asked them to not have me laugh too much, but this is one of the good aspects of social media. And I think it's super important in today's day and age that we as human beings are the ultimate creators in the universe. And if we stay masters of tools rather than let the tools master us, everything's going to be just fine. And, that's like, let's just say the Palantir. There's a great scene in The Lord of the Rings where Aragorn just says, hey, here's my sword. But, so Ryan, I met because I'm a seeker and I use social media used well. I've met many, many incredible human beings, and Ryan being one of them. And I don't feel old. I recently turned 60. And I don't know how old Ryan is. I had hair like that. Well, I never had hair quite that good, but I did have a full head of hair. But one of the things that gives me hope, and I think one of the reasons I healed really was to be a part of younger people who are awakening. Who is Ryan? Why you go about seasonal Ryan? Let's start there.
Yeah. So before I get into that, I will say this. While you sort of seek out the youth, I have always been attracted to spending time with older folks because I found that they hold this sort of unspoken wisdom. And in Western culture, at least in American Western culture, I've always felt like we mistreat, the boomers or like elderly folks, the silent generation, with like this sort of, oh, once you hit 70, they're just getting in the way, blah, 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 put them in the home. And one of my favorite things to do was have my grandpa tell me stories about his younger life growing up in, the late 30s, 40s, and then his 20s and his in the 50s. And I feel like there's so much wisdom that we lose by sort of just at a certain benchmark, we just shove these people in a home and forget about them. Oh, they're old. They don't know what they're talking about. They're not hip. But I think it's like this melding of, in ancient culture, the elders were revered, and it's for a reason, right? Partially because they made it to be that age, which is not a very common thing in the ancient world for many reasons. But I feel like there's just a disservice to society when we only say like, oh, it's only about Gen Z now and what Gen Z's opinions are, and there's some truth. Yeah. There's some truth to both sides of this story, but it's just like what we're going to probably talk about in this show, that everything's nuanced. And what I love about health is that it's opened up this whole world of philosophy for me about how nothing is at all black and white ever. And I think that's sort of the beauty and the mystery, right? So as far as my story goes, I'll kind of take you back on a Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure to the year 2000 and what would it have been, 15? And it was my first year of college, and I had just gone through my first sort of real breakup. So, like, my first love
Mm,
breakup. And,
got it.
that was a very hard time of my life. And actually what came out of it was I developed an eating disorder, and, I was 88 pounds for about 2 years. And so when I actually graduated with my associates at the time, like, got my associate's degree in 2016, I was like 100 pounds or something like that, super
Wow.
gaunt. But anyway,
Wow.
this period's important to this story because it was sort of my introduction to the medical system as from the lens of someone who's not doing well. Up until that point, I was never a child that got sick very often. If I missed school most of the time, it was often because I was playing hooky. I was out there doing all the things that actually I would advise anyone with young children to do, go and play in the dirt, go and get in the sun, go get your hands dirty. And that's what I did growing up. I grew up in central Kansas. There's not a lot to do in a small town. So what did we do? We were catching bugs, playing in mud, throwing dirt at each other on dirt hills, and playing airsoft. And so I feel like that point of when I had an eating disorder and had anorexia and went through that sort of both mentally traumatic and also physically traumatic period of my life, I was never the same after that. So even after I
Mm,
quote recovered from my anorexia, my body never felt the same. And I actually think in retrospect, I had chronic fatigue syndrome without actually knowing what it was called. Because I remember when I moved to California when I was 20, unlike other 20-year-olds, I would have to be in bed by like 8 p.m. because I was just exhausted from just the normal day, nothing extemporaneous. And so I knew that that wasn't normal, but I didn't know what was wrong and I didn't really know what to do about it. So I just kind of assumed at the time I was kind of getting into fitness and sort of generic like bodybuilding diets and things like that. I was just like, oh, I just need more carbs. And so I would be eating like 400 grams of carbs a day, thinking like, oh man, this is my problem. Carbs are energy, right? So I'm like, I'm clearly not getting energy. And I just didn't solve the problem. And so this goes on for several years. I'm now 23. And one night I was sitting in my apartment playing video games and also watching anime. So I'd like my TV over here, playing video games on my computer over here. I'm like doing two things at once. And my left hand starts to tingle. And I'm like, oh man, this is weird. My palm, like right here in the middle of my palm, starts to tingle.
hmm.
And I didn't really think too much about it at the time, other than it kind of freaked me out. It's sort of like my hand fell asleep and it just never woke up again. But I was texting my friend at the time. I was doing video editing, freelancing as for work. And so I figured it was just, part of the job. Like, I got a repetitive, strain injury from, ergonomics not being great or something like that, which is a pretty reasonable assumption to have. So next day I go to Walgreens, I buy a brace for my arm and I'm just working with a brace. About a week later, my right hand starts tingling. And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, that's kind of weird. But also maybe it's not out of the realm of possibility that, maybe I'm compensating too much with this hand now. And now I have carpal tunnel in two hands. So here I am at work running around with two freaking hand like wrist braces from Walgreens, like a weirdo, just like wander around at work all day. And then I take a trip home back to Utah where my family lives. And this is August 2019. Wake up one morning and my entire spine is on fire. So from like the base of my neck all the way to my tailbone, just on the spinal column, it's just like fire. Like someone had like thrown me into a fire pit and I get like a 3rd-degree burn. So I go into urgent care. And at the time, my old general practitioner that I had from when I was a kid to, graduated, college and moved to LA, he was on call for urgent care that day. So he was familiar with me. And we did some x-rays, saw nothing, obviously. And basically, he gave me like a strong dose of naproxen and said, go rest for a couple weeks. Well, over this couple weeks of rest, the tingling and the burning spread to pretty much every area of my body. So I'm kind of skipping a few steps in the story because there's like one day where it starts to be in my foot and then notice it in my leg and then side of my face and the back of my head. But long story short,
Mm,
by about August 27th, so like within a month from July 27th, 2019 onset of symptoms to the end of August, I go from tingling in one palm to tingling, burning, twitching fasciculations in like pretty much my whole body, like my crotch, my butt, like all over the place. And so now I'm like starting to freak the fuck out. And uh, uh, I'm at home. I haven't moved back home yet, so I'm still technically living in LA at the time. Go back to LA. I started going to different doctors, all this stuff. No one's really taking it that seriously. And what's kind of I don't know if I don't know if it's unique to my story, but it's unique to at least from what I've spoken about with patients is not one time in like my diagnostic journey did any physician give me a referral to a specialist because I don't think anyone believed me. And I have a hypothesis that it's because of my mental health history that was clearly labeled in my files of OCD, anorexia, generalized anxiety disorder, depression. And so I think
The
my
kind of
GP,
irony
mhm,
of that is that psychosomatic actually is
yeah,
real, just not in the
for sure.
way that normal or normie muggle medicine. I like that term, that muggle
I
medicine
love that. We're gonna keep that.
would understand psychosomatic. So,
Yeah,
yeah, fascinating.
and
Keep going.
so
Sorry.
no, no, and so eventually I get like another urgent care doctor that says to me, well, you know, sometimes we see these signs in young people that eventually get diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So I'm like, okay, they're going to order a
That's
brain
what I was
MRI.
going. I was wondering. That's what my brain. I'm like,
Well, that's where my
did
mind was
anyone
going too,
bring
because
up?
I'm not like sitting idly by. Like I'm in Dr. Google, like trying to figure this shit out. And so I actually stumble upon before they ordered this MRI. I actually stumble upon a TED talk from Terry Walls, who's a famous
Terry
integrative
Walls. Yes, I
doctor.
was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I'm convinced I have MS at this point, right? And so I go in, get my brain MRI, nothing comes back. They're like, yeah, you're good. And I'm like, okay, cool. However, you can still have lesions in your cervical spine and have MS. So could we do that too? And I think I kind of wore down my doctor at this point, and they're like, okay, we'll do a cervical MRI. And this is back in LA, I think, at this point. And I go to an orthopedic sports medicine doctor that my friend refers me to that he had had a shoulder surgery with several years before because they're really thorough. And anyway, they do a cervical spine MRI. I go in, I'm actually sitting at my doctor appointment. I remember this so vividly. They pull up the scan of the MRI, the nurse does, before the doctor even walks in. And I'm left alone with this scan just staring at me for like 10 minutes. And so I'm looking at the scan.
Mhm.
I have no idea how to read an MRI at this point. So I'm like looking at it. I'm like, oh my God. I'm with my friend Eric. And I'm like, Eric, this doesn't look normal. Like, this is fucking like, look at that. Like, this is bad. I'm like freaking out. I'm crying. I'm about to call my parents on the phone so
Mhm.
that they can be part of the appointment. And the doctor walks in, he sees me, I'm just like distraught. And he's like, whoa, what's going on? Your MRI is perfect. And I'm like, oh, just like this, I'm like bawling. And he comes in. And so come to about October 2019, my lease is up and I'm just so distraught. I can't work. I can't do anything. So we nullify our lease. I move back to Utah and I'm living with my parents now again. And so we're still trying to figure this out. And that's when I kind of stumble upon, at this point, I'm kind of off the MS trail, but Terry Wall's talk is still kind of in the back of my mind and this becomes
Yeah.
important later on in the story. So I kind of stumble upon this word called neuropathy, and I'd never heard of neuropathy before.
Mhm.
I'm a pretty naive young gentleman at this point in my life. And I finally get an appointment with just a generic neurologist. It takes me 3 months to even get in, but that's aside. And then he does an EMG, which is just an assessment of how your nerves function. They use electrical impulse to like actually measure the rate of charge to a nerve so they can measure the timing from signal sent to when your hand jerks or whatever, or whenever the nerve is stimulated. And then based on the timing, they can tell you how healthy a nerve is because there's like this benchmark. So they do an EMG and then they do a less sensitive study called an NCS for larger fiber nerves. Both of them come back with flying colors. In fact, I remember my neurologist telling me I've never actually seen like a Achilles, whatever the nerve was in my Achilles tendon, react so fast. Like
Hmm.
your nerves are great, is basically what he was saying to me. And I'm like, that's awesome, but I'm like burning everywhere right now. Like I seem calm, but like I'm on fire, like in this
Hmm.
area. And well, he's like, you know, you don't have neuropathy. So I think I don't. And then I get into a clinic at the University of Utah and they do what's called a skin punch biopsy, which is at this time a very new test. I think I was the first one actually ever done in whatever this clinic was. And what they're measuring is the nerve fiber density in your skin, so your sensory nerves. And these nerves are not tested
Mm,
for in an EMG and an NCS because it's not sensitive enough for those tiny capillary nerves. Anyway, that finally comes back. It's a positive test. I'm like, thank God I have a diagnosis. It's small fiber neuropathy. It's idiopathic, so they don't know what it is, why it's there. But okay,
right.
I'm not crazy. There's something physical going on. And basically, then they give me this whole spiel about like, well, they don't know what to do about it. Basically, we give you gabapentin, and then if that doesn't work, we go through this gamut of medication, circle jerking until we find something that takes any amount of edge off. I don't want to do these drugs because at this point, I'd already been researching neuropathy, and I had just read these horror stories about pretty much all of them, like
Mhm.
making you feel like a zombie, and then also if you want to switch them and coming off, there's tons of withdrawals. And I was like, I'm just gonna put up with the pain and try to keep
Yeah.
figuring this
Those
out.
those stories can save lives,
Oh yeah,
you
no, it's
know,
true.
like,
Yeah,
because it prompts it I mean, that's part of my story. It prompts us being our own advocate
for
and
sure.
looking for something better. It's
For
part
sure.
of the solution, so well done.
110%. Yeah, and so for me, at this point, I somehow convinced my GP, who's like my childhood GP. He's doing all the shots. So like, don't get me wrong, he's not helpful in like a doctor-patient relationship sense, but he's doing any test I want to do. He's like ordering ACTH stimulation studies that he doesn't even know what the names are to the hospital. And I go
That's
to,
awesome. That's a
yeah,
great doc. You're the CEO and
yeah.
they're your co-pilot. I love it.
Yeah.
I
So
love
in
it.
the end, I'm very thankful for him. It was funny when I was doing this ACTH stimulation study, I get there and he ordered it wrong because he didn't know what it was. And so I think he ordered it as like ATH. And the hospital's like, we don't know what an ATH study is. And I'm like, no, he means ACTH. And they make me call him because they think I'm just like making it up now. So I call him and they're like, yeah, he's just like, just do it. So they do that. Obviously, that test is normal because otherwise that'd be a bigger part of my story. But um, anyway, he actually gives me, I'm researching and I find this doctor at Boston Mass Hospital in Boston, one of the most prestigious hospitals in the world. And her name's Ann Oaklander. And she actually studies small fiber neuropathy because she found that 50% of people with fibromyalgia actually have small fiber neuropathy, not
Mm,
fibromyalgia. And so she's doing all these studies
gotcha.
and she's finding a lot of younger people being diagnosed with autoimmune component small fiber neuropathy. And I'm
Yep,
like, this is
yep.
the doctor I want to see. I don't care how long it takes. He sends in a referral. I get in. It's about like a year, like a 6-month wait or something like that. So this is like, oh, maybe not 6 months. I guess I get in pretty quick because I go in January 2020. So this is before COVID is like rampaging the world. It's sort of like it's in the news, but we're still kind of oblivious to it. I go to Boston. They confirm that they do an autoimmune marker test for, I can't remember what the marker actually stands for, but the acronyms are TSHDS. And anyway, that comes back with a big old red flag. I have like 10,000 antibodies, autoantibodies of this TSHDS. And
Makes
so I'm like,
sense.
okay, yes, now we have a reason, right? At this point, I'm not thinking of autoimmune as not like a definitive root cause, right? So, because the way I think about autoimmune now is I don't think autoimmune really means much other than you can argue that you have like T helper 1 cell, helper 2 cell issues, right? But it doesn't tell you why you have autoimmunity. But at this point, I don't know any of this stuff. So I'm just like, okay,
Right.
root cause. And they wanted to put me on a clinical trial for IVIG, which is intravenous immunoglobulins, which they use for other various autoimmune disease, some of which are neurological. And they want to get me in a clinical trial for it. However, in order to do that, I have to say I've taken all of the different pain medication routes and say that they've failed. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And then, long story short, I'll kind of cut to the chase. COVID happens and it shuts this whole thing down. Now I'm kind of off on my own because I don't really feel comfortable traveling around with this unknown virus rampaging the world right now. At this point, we don't know how bad it is. We don't know the gravity of it. So I'm like, I'm not going nowhere. I'm not getting this thing. We're not going anywhere. And so I return back to Terry Walls and I buy her book, Minding My Mitochondria. And this opens my mind to this idea of mitochondria as being basically the harbingers of our vitality in a sense. And
Absolutely.
so This is sort of where my story really takes a shift. I'll kind of cut to the chase just for sake of time, but this is where I start going down the rabbit holes of like dietary changes. I find things like paleo, I find ketogenic diets, I find the carnivore diet. I do kind of all these things. I start to find other modalities like red light therapy. I'm sitting by a red light device right here. And then I hire a guy named Live Vitae, who would be another fabulous guest, by the way. Live Vitae on Instagram or X or whatever. His name's Ryan Carter. He's a I think he has a master's in nutrition. He's a naturopathic doctor. Well, not doctor. He's a whatever you'd call him, like a naturopath.
ND,
Yeah.
fees, yeah.
And then he introduces me to Jack Kruse's work on circadian biology. And this is where my life changes. So at this point, I'm actually seeing positive improvement from dietary change and supplements and things like that. But I'm not like all the way there. I still got stuff going on. And it really wasn't until like the quantum piece and I started applying like
Mm.
circadian biology principles that this takes me to like a totally different place of wellness, like to feeling as like I haven't felt the way I feel now at 29 years old since I was probably 18 was the last time I felt even
Wow.
remotely this capable as far as like my cognition and just my physicality and all that stuff. That's kind of my story in a nutshell, but I'm open to taking this wherever we want to take it.
Yeah. Um, Great story. Yeah, just so many thoughts coming up. I was born and raised in LA, largely raised myself in the 60s and 70s. So,
Oh man, a beautiful time for
we
music.
it was, oh man, it was better than any movie. And interestingly enough, so Paleo Primal, I've been part of that movement since my healing in 2013. Actually found Mark Sisson, Primal Blueprint.
Oh yeah,
I'm actually one of the success stories in
very
the
cool.
second edition on. I'm one of the first 50 primal health coaches. And I would say the biggest commonality of people in primal, and it's so beautiful in a way, it's the canary in the coal mine. It
Hmm.
was the people that had two things in common. They were a lot sicker, ironically, than the average person in their age group. You can relate to that.
For sure.
And they weren't willing to do conventional method to some degree. And interestingly, at 2013, Dr. David Perlmutter was really
Oh
big.
yeah,
He had a
yeah.
PBS special, Grain Brain, Dr. William Davis, um, also, the grain free approach. And I understand now multiple levels, like, for instance, sunlight and nature exposure, and certainly toxic exposure, trauma, and so forth as big inputs to autoimmune. But as a pretty solid heuristic, I still think the concept of leaky gut
Oh yeah,
is efficacious
I agree.
and so 2013, I mean, hopefully you'll have me on, we can do my background story,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
long story short, I had very severe IBS, and, so I wasn't any hero. It took, the severe IBS and wanting to be CEO, so that it was May, it was summer, and I had 2 thoughts. I had figure it out or die. I was 47, the universe told me I wasn't gonna make 50, and that didn't scare me, and also science project of a lifetime, and, one of the people I like is George Bernard Shaw,
Yeah.
and, he has a quote that the test of a good education is how it does in a fight. So I was in a fight for my life, succeeded, but it got better than that. My wife, most important soul in the universe to me, healed as well, and that's how Healing with the Diamonds got started. I've had the blessed opportunity to just be accepted. There's a whole cadre of people with degrees, without degrees, that are what I call peer-to-peer citizen science.
Hmm. Right.
And it's what keeps me hopeful. If any young people are out there, yeah, it's just devastatingly missed opportunity. I take great pride that at 60, I'm metabolically healthier than 80, 90% of 30-year-olds.
Oh
If
yeah.
they want to throw down, and so
Dude, it's sad. I walk around and I see um I don't know, like teenagers and college age kids, and it's kind of disconcerting how unhealthy
Yeah,
the
it
youth
is.
is. And I see now, like, I have nieces, um, and they're just like these iPad kids. And I can't help but think how they'll turn out. In some ways, I'm almost fascinated to know how they'll progress. But it's almost like this, like, sort of like, I feel like I'm like thinking like these, we can think of like a Dr. Death from the Nazi regime back in the 40s, these 40s, and him doing these like creepy experiments on twins and stuff. I feel like that's what we're kind of doing to children with iPads, just without knowing we're doing crazy
Yeah.
experiments on prisoners, like they're our own children. So it's,
Yep.
but at the same time, I try to have hope that with people like yourself and other people that are not trying to just follow the conventional means of treatment per se, and they're open to this wider perspective, even though they don't know, it's like opening Pandora's box for them. I have hope that ultimately people will wake up to it. I mean, there's already there's more young people today like trying to log off of social media than like when I was getting into social media 10 years ago. So I think that's all positive as far
Yeah.
as like movement for sure.
Absolutely, and I've met a lot of people. Our daughter just entered high school, and I love talking with all ages, and all walks of life. That's really one of the beauties of any existence. I highly recommend that
I agree.
approach to everyone. But what you're kind of describing on the experiment, so we have a Healing with the Diamond Substack. I wrote an article called The Linchpin Generation. So
Okay.
something similar happened. And are you familiar with the Pottinger cat studies and the Price Pottinger
Oh, I know
Foundation?
of them, but they're not like fresh in my mind, but I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
So basically, Dr. Pottinger
Mhm.
did kind of experiment, but on cats, not humans. And it was mostly nutrition. And there were three generations of cats fed, let's say, the equivalent of an average modern human diet,
All right.
and three cats on three generations of raw, healthy food. And so the cats just went down in mental and physical degeneration. But thankfully, he did this. The great thing about the experiment was he took a third generation, say, processed diet cat, then started feeding that cat a proper raw cat food diet, and they reverted. That they
Wow.
subsequent
Yeah.
generations got healthier and healthier. And I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of a holobiont. And
Oh, a
you
little bit. Yeah.
mentioned mitochondria. So each human is a whole ecosystem on to ourselves. And mitochondria and then all the bacteria in us are kind of can adapt humans and I think heal humans quicker than most people would agree.
Oh
But
yeah.
let's I want to get into the juicy circadian rhythm stuff. But what do you think of an overarching concept of Terry Wall's stuff, the importance of a whole food, proper human diet? And there's a wide range. I focus people on if they're willing to go grain free because I've seen that the
Right. No, I
biggest
agree. Yeah.
return on
I think
investment.
especially for
You know,
autoimmune, that's pretty important for like there's actually quite a bit of good research around how well, it's specifically around glyphosate. I've spoken to Dr. Stephanie Seneff about this a couple times.
I love
Um
Stephanie Seneff. I'm
she's a
jealous.
G.
Yeah,
She's amazing. But she talks a lot about how glyphosate can impact like the tight junction spaces in the gut mucosa.
absolutely.
And it just like, I mean, you gotta imagine these like little doorways. And when they're open, like stuff just flies through them into the bloodstream. So I think a lot of the reasons, and I wrote an article on Substack one time about like, stop blaming the grains, blame glyphosate instead, something like that. Um, and I think there's stuff to be said about both, but I usually advise
Thank
very
you.
similar
Thank you
things.
for saying both. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Well, and that's the thing is like the further you get into this, because I think everybody goes through this sort of like transformation, and only the people that remain curious actually continue to learn. But everyone goes through this transformation on a healing journey where it's like you kind of enter and you think it's all about diet. Like I thought it was all about diet when I first got into it until
Mhm,
about 6 or 7 months into like Terry Wall's diet, and then also going to level 3 Terry Wall's, which is like a ketogenic version of her
mhm.
diet. And I'm like, okay, well, I feel better, but like I'm still dealing with a bunch of stuff. And so, then I'm doing like carnivore for like, 8 months and, still feel pretty good, but like I'm not getting any better. I made a tweet the other week that was something like, if you're on your 50th diet change and you're still not seeing changes, then maybe it's not the diet that's the problem.
Maybe it's not. Yeah, that's
And so
reasonable.
and so I really think that it goes to show, and like especially when we get into like the circadian biology things, it's actually pretty well studied, but there's so much about light that we just don't know. Like I was in a cohort 6 months ago and we were learning about biophoton emissions, which is just biological light that your
Wow.
body releases.
Yes.
Yeah. And
So
basically like,
my newest intellectual crush is
yeah.
Eileen Day McCusack,
Oh
and
yeah. Amazing.
I'm recommending, like, I Get This Way, I Got This Way about Primal Blueprint, and all due credit to the Primal movement because they
Oh
were
yeah.
popularizing Alessandro Fasano's work at Harvard
Mhm.
on glyphosate. They were circadian stuff, the mismatch theory. We have to move. We're part of nature, not apart from nature. And that overall framework is still such an important one for everyone on planet Earth, that modern living is a mismatch with what our mind, body, spirit, soul, biofields. It's an incoherent way to live. And I really like the concept of signal to noise ratio. So whole food increases the signal. Modern toxic foods increase the noise. Misaligned circadian rhythm increases the noise, decreases the signal. Not moving increases the noise.
Can I
We can
share
just use the signal to noise
yeah.
ratio
I'll
concept.
share another
But
analogy that I really like. I was
yeah.
explaining kind of just like a very basic view of like what non-native EMFs do to mitochondria. And I sort of like I phrased it like this, and I actually had an image for it. But imagine like the world's natural magnetic fields. So like the Schumann's resonance and all this stuff that
Mm,
our bodies like are accustomed to, like when we ground and stuff like that. It sort of emits this sort of nice curved wave. It's very pleasant to look at, it's like a crusting wave almost, and then it kind of repeats. Well,
mm,
kind of the way I like to explain non-native EMFs to people, I like the microwave analogies, but I like this one even better. Is like, imagine your mitochondria are writing on a chalkboard and they're like writing out these equations for health. And it's nice, you have that sort of nice, pleasant chalk to chalkboard sound going on. And then over here comes the non-native EMF with a nail and just stabs the board and starts scraping it. And then that nasty noise of the nail on the chalkboard is really getting annoying to the mitochondria over here that's trying to write these like really fine tooth and nail equations. And it just can't do it because it's like so distracted from these non-native fields. And so it's sort of distortion. So that's why I like what you said.
right. Yeah. So the noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I like what you said pre-show about this idea of like mismatch theory. I think ultimately, as opposed to like trying to get on a bandwagon of like a diet paradigm, or like it's all about Ray Peat, or no, it's all about being Jack Cruz and it's all about light and food doesn't matter, or no, it's all about nervous system stuff and somatic therapy. No, it's about all this shit, guys. Like it's all the shit. And so what I learned, and unfortunately or fortunately for me, I guess, because no one modality was like the kingpin for me, I had to do a bunch of different modalities together that ended
Mm-hmm.
up being what I call biological consistency. Because I had to go through that, it opened my eyes to this idea of really what anyone that should be doing as a CEO of their own health isn't trying to find the next guru, the next Terry Walls or the next Mark Sisson or the next Benazati or whatever. They should be trying to listen to all of them and then try to extrapolate information that's pertinent to them. And
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
what's difficult about that is you have to be able to critically think, and you got to be able to run trials on yourself, and you got to be willing to have trials fail a lot in order to find what trials actually work for you. And so I really feel like our jobs as coaches are less so someone coming to us and we tell them what to do. It's more about actually trying to open up their minds and have them ask better questions. So I always try to get my clients when they ask me like, what do you think about this test, or what do you think about this supplement, or what do you think about this XYZ? I say, well, what are you trying to achieve using that? I don't even answer them. I just say, well, what do you want to do with that thing? What are you trying to achieve? And 99% of the time,
Right.
they don't even know. And so immediately what I'll tell them is like, I'm not going to say whether this is good or bad or whatever. Sometimes I don't know because I haven't heard of it yet. And what I would
Right.
rather say is first, before you ever like try something, you should have a reason for why you're trying it that's not out of like a desperation motive. Because most of the time when you're sick, you're making decisions irrationally out of fear. And I understand that and I empathize with it. I mean, me and you both
Sure.
do. But if you want to get to where you want to go, you have to almost find, I mean, the term's radical acceptance, but you have to find joy in the shit. Like if you're like up to your nose in shit, which I mean, me and you have been in, right? You have to find peace there before you can ever move
Yep.
forward. And that's like that's probably like honestly the biggest hurdle I have working with anybody, but it's like the most important hurdle to actually cover. And usually that's where I start with somebody is like
I love that.
we need to find like self-love in the moment of like being, in the shit. So,
That I love that. That's so profound. And also it's virtually impossible to heal if we don't feel that we're worthy of healing.
I agree.
That was a big part. And having a purpose, I think greater than just personal purpose,
Can we talk about
some kind
purpose?
of what?
Can we get into you want me to do light first? I talk
Yeah,
about some of the
yeah,
light stuff
let's
first.
totally and then after I love purpose, but after purpose, then I'd like because we emphasize meeting people where they are and not
Right.
overwhelming them.
Agree.
So I'd like your and also we call it majoring in the major. And I take pride in only suggesting things that are huge returns on investment because I know lifestyle change is hard. So maybe I love the purpose because it's huge with our healing, finding your whys, however you want to call it. But I think it has to be more than personal, transpersonal, not transhuman, totally different,
Yeah.
transpersonal. And then,
Yeah.
then like you're totally different. Then I mean, like collective purpose. But then, yeah, you're kind of how to let the sun shine in like
Yeah.
Sheryl Crow's song, "I
Oh,
just
yeah.
wanna soak up the sun," just like an not no one's average, but just a family that's not really thought about bringing the power of the sun and
Yeah.
circadian, Cruisian insights, what you would do to not overwhelm them after
Yeah.
purpose. That would be great.
Yeah, as far as purpose goes, I usually have, and this is something that my mentor had me do, which was like on a sheet of paper, you put a line down the middle, and on one side you write the characteristics or qualities or whatever of your personality or whatever. It could be anything that you want to leave behind, and then
Mm.
on the right side you write all the things you want to become. And the
Oh, I
idea
love
of
that.
that practice is everyone initially, when you get diagnosed with something horrible or start developing horrible symptoms of whatever, your immediate thought is, I want to go back to before. But the truth about
Mm.
the before you is that that person, whether directly or indirectly, got you to where you are now. And so going
Wow.
back isn't actually serve you. And so for me, that was kind of an eye-opening moment for me because he asked me, like, tomorrow, if you were suddenly better, what would you do with that? And I didn't have an answer for him because
Hmm.
it's almost impossible to imagine. I actually have this sort of mini belief that sometimes you can get addicted to solving the problems that you have, but not actually ever solving them because without the problems, you
Mm.
lose your identity. You start to identify with your
Yep.
your
Yep.
diagnosis or whatever.
Yep.
It could be many things.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
and I definitely did that. Like part of the reason my anorexia took 2 years and not like 1 year or 6 months or whatever is because I was addicted to like this idea of solving my anorexic problem the perfect way. And while I was trying to find the perfect way, which there wasn't one, I was just destroying my body even further. You know what I mean? And so I'd already been through this story. And so I wasn't willing to do that again. And so I think actually having gone through anorexia made me a lot stronger for going through this because I'd already gone through all these
Yep.
mistakes of,
Yep.
twiddling my thumbs and being too scared to try something, sort of thing. So I
Yep.
sort of had a leg up in that. But as far as purpose goes, I mean, Terry Walls is a big proponent of this, of like, it's also about finding things to do that are outside of just trying to heal all the time. Like, joining a church group or like finding community that's outside of just healing. I think it sounds really stupid, but I think everybody is well served by having, quote, normie friends. Meaning, what I mean by that is like friends that
No,
aren't like me or Larry here that are like really obsessed with learning about biology and stuff. Like, it's good to have friends that have no knowledge of that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so,
No, I'm just laughing because my wife always says that she had a TED Talk every morning and it was okay at 6, but not 5 a.m. And,
I love
you
that.
know, it's good for us to talk music
Yeah,
and travel. And
love it.
we strangely, and it's because we're happily grain free, but she loves the British baking show. It's just
Yeah.
that she just loves the host. So it's yeah,
Well,
absolutely, and,
I love
my
talking about
pets and
music.
tennis.
Music is like a side passion of mine of which I'm not very
Are you a
talented, but I
deadhead?
love it.
Are you a deadhead?
My dad's a
Dave's
deadhead.
picks.
I'm not a deadhead. I'm a leadhead. I'm a leadhead.
All
But
right, pass,
my
pass, I'll give
my dad's a deadhead. But I'm very much into like late 60s, early mid late. Oh, there's like some good stuff towards late 70s, but like I'm very much around like mid late 60s to like to mid 70s, like bands that started in that
my
period.
god,
That's like my peak.
we could we have to have a part 2, 3,
We
and
should.
4
That's what
just
I'm
on
saying. We got to
this.
do it. But I could like literally
But
talk
yeah,
about like.
I
But as far as
that's
purpose
and
goes, it's all that stuff.
yeah.
No, no, that was it.
And also, I think we were going to talk about, kind of spirituality and, you know, you can get spiritual ego inflation. You can get that, you've become CEO of your health and to see people whole and healed. That's such an important part. We're literally as health coaches, we believe in our clients even
For
when
sure.
they don't believe in themselves.
I
So
think
the
that's
whole that, and
90% of the
that's
job.
impossible to do in a judging mode, just totally impossible.
I
It
feel like
has to be
90% of the job is just believing in them. You know what I mean? I literally
yep,
think it's like
yep.
that's like 90% of it. And you know what's funny about that is when it comes to purpose, I have sort of a weird view of my like personal purpose where I've decided that I don't need one other than to just be as succinctly human as possible. That's kind of like what I've
No,
decided
that's
my
the
purpose
ultimate
is.
purpose, Ryan.
Yeah. But I kind of like came upon this. I was texting my dad about it and he was like, "You've reached enlightenment." I was like, "No, my ego's too fat
That
still."
yeah, he
My
probably did this, you just didn't know if it was a FaceTime call, yeah. I was gonna you can now, happily, carry water and chop wood for the rest of your life.
I probably could. It'd probably be okay, but I unfortunately like
Yeah,
talking too
the
much.
greatest thing I mean, the greatest thing is being a hobbit. Like,
It
people
is.
are
It
like,
is
"I
the
gotta
best
do
thing.
something." I'm like, "I don't have to do anything, I just wanna read a book and."
As long as we get second breakfast and elevensies, we're good. But
There you go, there you go. So, I wow. Yeah, maybe so you have a client, a family, they wanna reintegrate with ancestral wisdom. They wanna let the sun shine in. Where do you start, and, yeah.
well, I think usually what I like to do with clients that kind of come to me with that idea is I kind of teach them about this idea that everything on earth and everything within us really operates on cycles. Like there's phases of, we could go on to like the grand scale of like every X number thousand years, the earth tilts from here to here sort of thing. And that determines things like ice ages and a bunch of crap. There's all these, but we're bound by these natural cycles. And there's,
Yeah.
24-hour cycles, there's yearly seasonal cycles, there's, every 10,000 year cycles on earth, and then beyond, it just keeps growing forever. And I think what humanity has done, and it's been more apparent within the last 150 years, and especially within the last 30 years, since the advent of like heavy LED use within our homes, is we've created staticism where everything's static. Outside, we everyone
Hmm.
recognizes the seasons, but indoors, if we have just like blue fluorescent lighting, we keep the
Wow.
indoor light
Yeah.
the same 24/7, 365 and a quarter days a year for our entire lives. And so part of, I
We're
think,
not
being
having to
human,
adapt. We're not
yeah, no,
having
that,
to
yeah.
adapt anyway.
And so part of healing is actually just simply looking outside, noticing what nature is doing, and then trying to be out in it. And that's really kind of what I tell my clients is like when the sun is up, be out there as much as you can be out there. And then obviously we can get into things around like how to practice safe sun exposure, especially when you've never done it before and you don't have like a solar callus and all this stuff. But usually what I tell people is like, we all have these internal, pretty much everyone, luckily, at least has heard the word circadian rhythm. I've met a few people that never have, but luckily, most of my clients have heard the two words together. And what I tell them is that this circadian rhythm is responsible for every energetic, metabolic, hormonal function in the body. Like literally none of light doesn't not touch one iota of us. And so
I love that.
usually what I have people focus on in the beginning is trying to get morning light because that's sort of the kingpin of light. And if you miss it, you're kind of starting with a clock jumped ahead at some point, no matter what you do the rest of the day. So we had a good question in our school community the other day about like, hey, if I catch sunset but I don't catch sunrise, is that enough of the right light stimulus to set my circadian clocks? And I was like, that's a good thought, but honestly, it's not because sunrise is actually quite different than sunset in that it's brighter. So sunrise is brighter than sunset, and it's that way for a
That
reason
is
for
true.
us. And that's because it stimulates, cortisol. And cortisol is our wakefulness hormone, right? And so
Yep.
we need that cortisol rhythm to be correctly placed in if we're going to also have proper melatonin curves, which is sort of like, I like to call it our restfulness hormone. I mean, it does so many other things. It's like probably the most crazy antioxidant in the body. Like, I get almost viscerally angry when like
Yep.
I hear a functional doctor talk about glutathione as our master antioxidant. And I'm like, no, melatonin's like kind of the guy. If you're going to talk about like crazy, like replenishing hormones. But usually what I would tell people to do is like, and I'm working on this with my mom right now, who's trying to lose some weight. And she's doing all the generic right things. Like she eats what I would consider like a paleo diet without grains, some whole foods, gets them from a farmer's market. We have a local farmer that we see, all that type of stuff. She's exercising. And I think I told her like, I think light is probably your last component of this because things like
Huh.
insulin also have a 24-hour cycle. It kind of peaks around early afternoon. And that's why people will tell you, well, don't eat after 7. What they're really trying to say, and they probably don't even know why don't eat after 7 works, but it's because your insulin
The
sensitivity
pancreas
has a
shuts
20.
down.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so the other thing too is when you're eating after dark, your body's trying to upregulate melatonin if you're living in, a better circadian light. Like I can turn this light, which is a flicker-free chroma light, all the way down like this. And this is normally what in here would look like, or we would have candles or something like that.
Got it.
But when you turn the lights back on after dark, which is especially difficult in the winter if you're in the northern hemisphere, you're actually stimulating cortisol again, and that's stimulating insulin again. And so you're kind of perpetuating this like metabolic like shutdown activity over and over. And your body is like, I always try to tell people, your body's never broken. You're just living in an environment in which it can't catch up. It's like a bucket that's overflowing and you can't empty it fast enough. Like your body's actually acting appropriately. Like I actually view things like obesity and like diabetes in some ways as an adaptive response to a really shitty
Ooh, yeah.
environment. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I can give you my theory. The insulin resistance is absolutely not a defect. It's by design because I don't know if a human could survive without their subcutaneous
No.
adipose fat system.
No.
And then, so if the body kept letting energy in there, the mitochondria would die essentially.
Exactly.
The tissue would die, the organ would die, and the person would die. So it's a triage response to, and it worked for me because I was
Mhm.
over 350 pounds. I kind of had the
Wow.
opposite. By 25, I was 350, and I spent till 47 between 290 and 350.
Wow.
So there was like 10 years that I didn't even attempt to get onto an airplane, when other
Yeah.
people my age were dating and stuff. I
That's
was,
hard. Yeah, that's
but
hard.
that's all in the past,
Yeah.
many lifetimes ago. But yeah, our body is always on our side. And many people that I worked with, for the 6 years, thousands of people coaching, as a health coach, not giving medical advice, but they had really good metabolic markers, and
Mhm.
they were 250 or 300
Yeah,
pounds.
that's
You know,
actually
they
pretty
in
common.
a
I think
lot of
there's
ways.
what do you know the exact percentage of like it's actually a pretty decent percentage of people that are like actually significantly obese are still technically metabolically like functioning.
Yeah, the problem is the inflammation from
Yeah, exactly.
the excess body fat, but and then, of course, the flip side happens, TOFI, thin on the outside,
Oh yeah.
fat on the inside.
Yep. Yep. But it's sort of like when I try to explain circadian biology to people, I usually just tell them like I could tell you exactly what times a day each thing's rise, and it changes throughout the year, which is what makes it like a little bit tricky. So like for right now here in Utah where I'm
Cool.
at the 41st latitude, sunrise is like a little bit after 7. So you get out there, you try to catch that early sort of blue, heavy red infrared wavelengths that stimulates your retinal ganglial cells that have these opsins in them that are photoreceptive proteins. All that you need to really take away from this is that certain opsins respond to specific wavelengths of light. So melanopsin is a particularly blue favorable opsin. And that's the one that you need to be stimulated in the morning to send to what I call your little bean in your hypothalamus, your suprachiasmatic nucleus, or your SEN, your your timekeeper of your body, the signal that, hey, it's morning. We need to send signals to the rest of our peripheral clock system that it's morning and we need to get going. So you have like clocks in pretty much every organ system of the body, including your skin. And they're all stimulated by
Yep.
these different wavelengths of light based on these different opsins at any given amount of time. So you have neuropsin, which is UV photoreceptive. And so usually when people tell me like, well, isn't UV light bad? Am I going to get skin cancer? Blah, 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 blah. I usually say, well, if UV light was inherently evil, then we wouldn't have opsins that require UV light to actually perform functions in the body. Like
You
we
gotta
would
you gotta
probably
laugh, like,
be mole people, if we weren't meant to be in the sun. And so everything's contextual, right? And so usually what I tell people is like, there's a couple important sunrise aspects of the day. So there's initial sunrise. You want to kind of be out there for like 10 minutes on a sunny day. On a cloudy day, because it's a question that always comes up like, it's cloudy, so I'm not going to get any sun today. Well, luckily the sun is a pretty dang powerful ball of fire. And if a little cloud got in the way of like us living, I think none of us would have made it this far. So you still should get out when it's cloudy, but you do need to be out there longer as far as like saturating those receptors in your ganglial cells. So it's like I usually tell people like on a sunny day, you can be out there for like 5-10 minutes. On like a cloudy day, you really want to be out there for like 20. Now, ideally, you just go outside and stay out there for as long as you can. But people have work, people got things they got to do, stuff like that. So if you're as far as like setting the SCN, it's like first light. And then one thing I've been talking about with my mom lately this morning when it comes to building what's called your solar callus, and all that is like it's a sheath of melanin. It's your tan. Melanin absorbs like 99.9% of like the electromagnetic spectrum. And so it's a good shield. It does a bunch of other stuff. We'll have to do a whole episode on that alone because it's like endlessly fascinating, just melanin in and of itself.
mhm,
But the important thing to remember is the reason people generally get really bad sunburns is because they live a mismatched life where they're inside 90% of the time, which is like the
yeah,
legit stat that most of us live indoors 90% of the time. And then you go on a Bahamas vacation in the middle of
yep.
July and you're exposed to this UV 12 or 13, and your body has no resistance to this because it has no exposure. The analogy I like to use is like building muscle in the gym. You wouldn't have like, a scrawny dude go squat 300 pounds on their first day in the gym.
Yep,
And so that's like
exactly.
you going to the Bahamas in the middle of July, but never going outside the rest of the year. And then you wonder why you look like Larry the Lobster when you get back home. You know what I mean? And so you have to titrate your sun exposure. So just like building muscle in the gym where you slowly add weight every week, you slowly want to add more light stimulus over a period of days and weeks and months to slowly give your body more resistance. And so there's another, it's called UVA rise. So there's 3 forms of UV light. There's UVA, UVB, UVC. They're like the three that are
Right.
important to know about. UVC is mostly filtered out by the ozone layer. So we don't got to worry about that guy so much. Although I will say this, until we had the ozone layer, UVC was a big old problem for just life on the planet because it basically vaporized it. So the ozone layer basically helped make multicellular life like much more potential because you didn't have this nasty like UV filter like destroying everything on the surface. So UVA mostly gets to the surface almost completely in a sense. And UVA actually starts to stimulate melanogenesis, which is kind of the precursor process to making your solar callus or melanin. And so this
Right.
happens usually around like 8:30, I think, in my area. So like I go outside, I see sunrise, and then I'll try to go outside again and get UVA rise so that I can, and all these signals are simply telling the body like, hey, this is what time it is. We need to start preparing for whatever's coming next. So like when you get UVA rise, you're still getting red and infrared light from the sun. It's like 50% of the spectrum is available all day. UVA starts to stimulate the skin and says, hey, we got to start prepping melanin because UVB is coming up and you don't want to burn. So you get that. And then you can use an app like my favorite app is my Circadian app. It's made by a friend of mine, Sarah Kleiner. It actually tells you
Nice.
directly, you can log in your location and it'll tell you when these wavelengths are available in your area because they're different depending on the latitude that you're at. So my Circadian app, and then there's another one called DMinder is another one that people can
Yep.
get for free.
Yep.
That's kind of a good way to do it. But when you start building your actual tan or your solar callus, I tell people to try and get like that early UVB spectrum. So like UVB is around 3, UV3. Try to get like the first, 20, 30 minutes of that. And then when you're new to it, try to get the first bit and then come out when it's about to go away again for like the last 30 minutes. So that way you're not exposing yourself to the harshest amount of UV light, but you're still getting enough to start, moving this process along. And then what you'll notice is that after like a year of doing this, you come back the next summer, you're way more resilient to higher UV as long as you practice these circadian principles throughout the year than you would be otherwise. And so that's kind of like the simple version. And then usually I see if clients can do it, if you can catch sunset, that's a great way to prime your body for like proper melatonin release within the pineal gland because you're just giving that circadian signal that hey, dusk is approaching. We need to start down regulating certain functions and upregulating, restoration in a sense. So that's sort of like my like 50,000-foot view crash course on like proper light environment. The other things that would be important are like, what do you do about indoor lights? Well, try to emulate what's going on outside, inside as much as possible. So, like the sunset where I'm at here. So, like, technically, there should be no lights. Like, if you live in a perfect world, at best, you'd be using firelight at night. Like, if you can use firelight at night, that's usually what I suggest everybody do. Like, if you can use candles or you have a fireplace, it's great in the winter. It's way more pleasant on your circadian systems, and it's very negligible as far as melatonin suppression goes. The next best thing would be to get like maybe some like low flicker, can't really see them because it's a little blurry, but low flicker like red bulbs like I have right here. They're a little bit less disruptive to the circadian like cues and melanopsin specifically, but they're still not benign. You know what I mean? Like if I turned, and I'll just do this to show you guys, if I turn this all the way up to bright and then I turn it around on me like this, like because that light's bright, even though it's technically in the orange, red, amber spectrum, because it's bright, it's still going to downregulate melatonin because it's bright. You know what I mean? So it's not, it's also, it's kind of a two-part problem of like having the right wavelengths at the right time and also the right brightness at the right time. And the thing is, no one's going to be perfect with it. I'm not perfect by any means, I mean, we're talking on a computer right now at like 7 o'clock my time. You know what I mean? If I had any respect for my circadian biology, I'd be like, nah, we can't do this interview. We got to do it before sunset at 5 only. That's the latest I'll go. But the more resilient you get,
Well, thank you.
oh, no, 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 you're good. But the more resilient you get, you have more wiggle room. So I would say like that's is where like individuality comes in, right? When I was at my sickest, what I used to do was because I was living with my parents. After it was dusk, I would go to my bedroom and basically sit in the dark with one red bulb on, and I would like probably read a book. Funnily enough, at the time I was reading the Lord of the Rings series in like original paperback. It's like literally from like it's like my pages were like ripping. It's like how old it was. But
I
but I did
love it.
that because I wanted to have as much melatonin upregulation as possible before I went to bed. The minute the sun was down, I would just jot it upstairs. because I was just super anal about it. I don't know if it's like that necessary to be that anal about it per se, but truthfully, there's the saying brighter days, darker nights. If you're getting brighter days, like let's say you're acing the sunbathing trail and you're getting out there and you're practicing good circadian rhythm cues outside, but you're ignoring darkness at night, then you're ignoring 50% of the story and you still get an F. If you
Hmm.
really want to live with proper rhythm, you need to appreciate darkness as much as you appreciate light. And it's about embracing the yin and yang of those things. And that's sort of like, and that's the beauty of cycles. So it's like the more you understand earth cycles, the more you can
Hmm.
understand your own biology because we're all bound by those. We evolved under those cycles. So as if you could understand earth cycles, like you could be like, you'll be smarter than any biophysicist, like doctor that's working under fluorescence all day. Like no doctor I've ever even spoken to mentioned any of this to me ever. And I'm talking to people that
Yeah.
probably have like these insane levels of academia and medical, like academic debt from all their schooling, and they don't know anything about melanopsin or neuropsin or how all these integrate
Yeah.
into metabolism and hormone function. And it's like, I'm just this guy that got sick and had to learn it to save himself. And so you
Well,
don't have to be
yeah, the
the
test
brightest
of a
bulb
good
in the
education.
yeah. And so the thing about it is like you don't have to be the brightest bulb in the shed to learn these things. And in fact, this sounds silly, but sometimes my best clients are like the least generically educated. Meaning like they didn't like get a biochem degree or like an advanced collegiate degree. And I find sometimes that the people that are the most difficult to work with are people that are actually on the upper echelon of generic intelligence, and it's because they put themselves in their own way. They overcomplicate nature.
You probably love Bruce Lee, but he calls that
Yeah,
the deluded mind is the overeducated mind because it gets in the way of its own fluidity.
it's so
And
true.
also,
Like,
um, yeah,
I have a future sister-in-law who I shall not name for my own protection. But she has a very advanced degree and she has tons of metabolic health problems. She has PCOS, she has prediabetes, she has hypertension, and she just got put on statins. She has like the trifecta of metabolic disease at like 24 years old.
she should come to us, Ryan. That's what we specialize in.
Yeah.
Seriously, I mean, we really
But the
do.
thing I've struggled with is because is super intelligent, but it's like her intelligence gets in the way of her being open to these other ideas because it's not what her doctor told her. Her doctor told her, "Oh, you got PMS. Sorry, that's bad luck." Sort of thing. And so it's
Sorry,
hard to
I shouldn't, yeah,
but I get it, you know, you
good.
gotta break it. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think what I like to put it this way is and I had to look in the mirror and do this to myself, like, if I was so goddamn smart, I wouldn't have been this sick, or I would have already figured out how to fix it. And so sometimes you just gotta go down a path long enough and then look in the mirror one day and think, if I was doing it's a definition of insanity, as Einstein says, right? If doing the same thing over and over again was going to bring me a different result, then I probably would have found out the truth by now. And so it's sort of like that diet saying I said earlier. If you've done 20,000 diet changes and you're still dealing
Yeah.
with 10,000 problems, maybe it's not the diet, maybe it's something else. And so you got to expand your mind. So that's why I'm saying, like, I kind of view myself as like the ultimate generalist because I think to understand human physiology or like our place on the earth, you need to understand more than just one specialty. Or like for example, like I love Stephanie Seneff. Her primary research is around glyphosate and I think deuterium, but she's just really good at those two things because that's her life's work. And I think that's great. But if I'm working with someone that's dealing with crazy systemic stuff, I don't know if working with Stephanie Seneff one-on-one would be a great idea because she's only going to be able to help you with deuterium and glyphosate. And that's probably a bad example. I'm sure she knows like tons of other stuff, but it's just this idea of, I think to be a good steward of what human physiology is, you have to, you kind of have to understand what our place in nature is, not just, the electron
Well,
transport chain.
I love that, and you're mentioning 2 of my favorite words, being a polymath, a natural polymath, and being a natural philosopher. Another Bruce Lee quote is, "Do you know my friend be neutral? Do you know why this cup is useful? Because it's empty. And the first Doctor Strange movie was brilliant.
Oh yeah.
And anyone can heal. And, I don't want to, if they're able to, you know, they don't have to literally get on their knees, but say, teach me. I can help anyone who gets to that teach me phase. I can't help anyone that is literally getting in the way of their own healing. And there's more great quotes about that. Silence your ego and your power will grow. And all those things are great. The Kung Fu Panda series has
Oh,
really
man, yeah.
great wisdom and also being playful. You got to this. I mean, I was super excited. I was like, okay, figure it out. Yay. Don't figure it out. Die,
I mean, you only have two
It's
choices, right?
yeah, but that sense of, playfulness, and also I think we're both great health coaches because it is play for us. I mean,
Yeah, it
it's
is. Yeah.
helping people unlock their healer within.
Yeah,
I'm
it is
not
true.
They're healing themselves. I'm just helping them unlock their
In
intuition
a sense, we're
and
sort of like
their
we're like
wisdom.
shepherds. We're like shepherds. We're sort of
Yeah.
like, and my favorite thing ever is when a client will come to me and they'll have like this revelation, and I'm like, oh man, that seed I planted 6 months ago, it's blooming now. Let's go.
Yes.
And so I think that should really be the goal of any practitioner, really, is like make them the educator, like turn them into an educator, like make them seek knowledge. And that's why I think, like, we were talking to Stephen Hussey earlier, and I said I don't even view myself as a practitioner or an NTP or a coach or any of that stuff. I view myself as like a bad philosopher, pretty much. Like I really view myself as like we're really just
Yeah.
exploring philosophy. And actually, for most of natural history, I mean human history, philosophers and scientists were like one and the same. I
Natural
mean,
philosopher, what I
yeah,
just mentioned. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I know I've already kept you over time. And you said this great ball of fire, and I was going to ask you, what about the electric sun theory? But that'll be,
We'll do a
which
part
is,
two.
yeah, on the electric, because it really is important. Everyone look up electric sun theory. But so do you think, in retrospect, I know it's hard, but did you, and like you, I had a opportunity where I tried more conventional things before I got the severe IBS. So when I got the severe IBS, I knew that the second go around I was going to be the CEO. So that was, but this almost a sense of adventure. Like I love that on that sense of purpose. You were saying, no, not going back to before, but going back to something that hasn't even been achieved yet, a new higher plateau. And another one, I'll just end with this. I had another thought, but it escaped me. In that Doctor Strange movie, at one time, the Ancient One is looking at Stephen Strange and she says, "You wonder what I see in you? Possibility." And that,
Yeah, love
those
that.
quantum possibilities. So, about being in a good chair during a healing journey, maybe the power of mindset or whatever philosophical words of wisdom you want to. Well, I know I was going to ask about families. So we were talking about health coaches. I'm sure this has happened to you. And is this one of the happiest things? You have a client and then they become the educators of their parents or their kids,
Well, yeah,
or like
that's
you mentioned, sister-in-law. How fun is that? Is that one of the most fun things
that's
ever?
probably the coolest thing. It's also been fun to see some of, like I mentioned my normie friends earlier. They've been asking me about like blue blockers and all this stuff. And so it's fun to just like, if you live by example, the right people will meet you or you'll meet the right people. And one thing I've always had a skill for, whether it's by the grace of God or, whatever spiritual entity or nothing at all, who knows, is I meet people that afford me opportunity and I almost never take it for granted. Like I kind of look back at my life and I feel like everything's happened to me exactly as it was supposed to go. And I met the right people at the right time for right things. I met the wrong people at the right time to teach me certain things. And
Ooh, I love that.
the thing about life, and I learned this not to get like weirdly emotional or anything. I lost my grandpa in October, and he was my favorite person in the world. Like
Sorry.
amazing. Like, and what's funny about it is he wasn't, he was definitely unique. I'll give him that. He was a weird guy. But there was nothing particularly grand or like affluently special about him. But there's this video that I shot of him, and I totally forgot that it even happened. This would have been to Christmas 2019. So I was like going through my stuff. This was Christmas that year, 2019. I asked him in sort of a comedic moment. He was sort of known to be a funny guy. He'd be like the grandfather that's like, pull my finger and then he farts on you sort of thing. He was a funny
Yeah.
dude. I asked him what like makes a happy life. And I was asking him in like a
Mm.
joking way, like I was trying to provoke like a joke conversation with him. And then he asked me if he wanted me to answer seriously. And I was like, all right, sure, why not? And he gave me like this really simple but like profound answer that when I was putting together this sort of montage of photos of him after he passed, just like really hit me in a different way now that I've gone through all this other stuff. And he was saying like to be a good person is to, find people that you love and to make experiences with them. And I feel like that's sort of life in a
Right.
nutshell. You know what I mean? It's like you meet people that you love and you treat them with honesty and you make memories with them. It was his birthday
Wow.
yesterday. And so I was a bit emotional yesterday. And I was making a little Facebook post on my private Facebook about him just for myself, really. And in it, I wrote something about the beauty of our relationship was that our time was finite. Because if we were Brian Johnson and we lived forever, I think we lose a bit of magic from this sort of physical existence that
Mm,
can't be duplicated with a life in infinity. So, what I usually
mm,
tell people that are going through a really rough time, whether it's their health or anything like in their sort of like physical space, is that regardless of what's going to happen to you tomorrow, I mean, regardless of what's gonna happen, you're only gonna be here the one time in the way that you know of yourself. You know what I mean? So, there's no point wasting it by, being scared all the time or being fearful of tomorrow or all this stuff because like, anything could happen at any time. It's making use of the time that you have. You know what I mean? And that's regardless of if you're sick or not or whatever. You know what I mean? If I got cancer tomorrow, like, yeah, I'd be shocked and, I'd probably cry and freak out or whatever. But I would eventually get to this place of like, I'm gonna work through this because there's a lesson here somewhere. And so everything in life is a lesson if you find the opportunity in it, and only you can do that. No one can teach you it. No one can, you can't hire anybody to tell you the answer. I think the ultimate aspect of being the CEO of your own health is the self-discovery because you come out of it such a different person than when you entered, and that person that you exit as is like infinitely a more wise person than you ever would have become any other way. And so I end up being really thankful for like my really dark experiences because it's made me way more wise at 29 than I think I ever would have been. So I'll leave that with
wow.
everybody.
Yeah, that incredible. And I think a wizard named Gandalf would have said, all we have to decide is what to do with the time we are given. And yes, I absolutely, I'm 60. I feel like I've had 50 different versions of me and 50 different lives. So you're an amazing young man. Truly, another favorite of mine is Steve Rogers quotes, but my faith is in individuals because I mean, not just me, many people, but I discovered more about how to reverse chronic illness. Sadly, it's not an exaggeration. In one weekend, than a $5 trillion sick care industry. I
So
mean,
true.
just me, a kid from Brooklyn in a weekend,
So true.
if the basic philosophy is incorrect, then you're just piling on higher and deeper, so to speak, PhD, piling on higher and deeper to a faulty foundation. You're just building a bigger monument of nonsense, is all that's going on. So, but on the other side, I learned from hundreds of people in podcasts like this before doing my own podcast. So in
Uh-huh.
a way, the podcast itself in health coaching is paying it forward. And Ram Dass, who I didn't even know of a few months ago, and other people, but he said, we're all walking each other home.
Yep.
And, I wouldn't say it's an obligation, that because that's completely the wrong word and frequency. But wounded healers, most of them, I can't say all of them, you just want to help other people heal. You know that they have to heal themselves, but if you can nudge them with a book, or if they do become clients, or if they don't become clients, if they do a discovery call with me, I'll say, well, I suggest this book, and, best of luck. It, and, maybe it's selfish, but the more healthy people out there, the better,
I
the
agree.
better the
Yeah.
collective frequency is.
Yeah. I want to get people so healthy that I have no job.
There you go. A good health coach wants to be fired. Perfect. All
Exactly.
right. Well, and
Exactly.
you went over time. I appreciate that. I look forward to many future interactions. Thank you so much for gifting your time. A wounded healer would understand this. I'm very happy for you
Oh,
that
thank you.
you had some wounds, because the wounds are where the light gets in.
So
So,
true.
speaking of light,
So true.
so, and I'm going to tell my audience this, because on YouTube they'll see us. I've laxed off on my nighttime, light environment routine.
Oh,
So,
man.
like many podcasts, it helps refocus. I'm accepting it with
Yeah.
humor and grace.
Yeah.
I'm not beating myself up with that. It's just a great reminder of times in the past that it was worth the effort. That's all. I'm just reconnecting that it was. And, as we were talking, I was kind of planning some of the changes I'm going to make. And I'm doing it with a sense of wanting to do it, not with a sense of guilt not
Oh,
doing it.
yeah. Love it.
I hope that look up, I'll give all of Ryan's contact info. He's an amazing follow. Every time I get a Substack alert, I'm opening it. I follow him on X, I have to follow on Instagram, but this is how we heal, is the wounded healers are gifts to us, essentially. So keep on gifting, keep on learning, Ryan. Wow, what a future. 29 and already have learned so much.
I appreciate
It's
you.
really great. All right. Take care, everyone.